let's check on the stock market before we get serious. Oh, stock market looks like it's up. Don't know why. It's because, according to CNBC, the S&P is going up because investors are trying to claw back losses. They always have some stupid reason that I can't actually convince myself is the real reason. They're going to claw back losses. All right, fine. Let me get my comments working here, and then we'll have the show of shows. The show that nobody could possibly predict. Come on. Come on. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the highlight of human civilization. It's called Coffee with Scott Adams, and there's never been a better time in your life than right now. But if you'd like to take a chance on taking this up to a level that nobody's ever experienced with their tiny, shiny human brains in the history of the universe, all you need is a cup or a mug or a glass, a tank or chalice, a stein, a canteen, jug or flask, a vessel of any kind. Fill it with your favorite liquid. I like coffee. And join me now for the unparalleled pleasure of the dopamine hit of the day, the thing that makes everything better. It's called a simultaneous sip, and it happens, that's right now. Go. Not bad. Could be better, but not bad. Well, despite the rise in price of coffee, did you know that according to the National Coffee Association, which is where I go for all my coffee information, it's called the NCA, has revealed that 2/3 of American adults drink coffee daily, with an average of 3 cups consumed per day. 2/3 of Americans. That means that 1/3 of Americans are sad and tired all the time. They don't know what the problem is. 1/3. Sorry about it, 1/3. Hey, Data Republican on X. If you don't follow Data Republican, you should. It's one of the better accounts. And what Data Republican does is data, but does it really well with AI. And has now developed a new tool that you can use that's a DEI funding detector. It's still in beta, but apparently what it can do is it can scan billions in federal awards and IRS filings, and then it uses AI to look through all that data, and it can find even when they're hiding DEI by changing the names. So it's clever enough to say, oh, that's really DEI, even though you're not using any of those words. So it can uncover DEI-focused awards, reveal mission mismatches when the money and the nonprofit don't align. It can look for DEI-specific flags. So that's going to be fun as we try to remove all the racism from the world with getting rid of the DEI. And it does a little more. Here's some good news. There's been the discovery of an exoplanet called K2-18b, which is, how I refer to it usually. And they think that it has an alien ocean that may be teeming with life. So there's a 99.7% certainty that the planet has at least one gas in its atmosphere that, at least on Earth, is produced only by living things. Now, what do you think are the odds that that planet is actually teeming with life? Because there's a gas that on Earth is associated with living things. Is that good enough? I don't know. I'm not going to wait for the aliens. I don't think. But wouldn't it be amazing if we found some actual aliens someday? Don't you want to live long enough to see some aliens? Well, here's the good news. According to many podcasts, we have captured aliens in warehouses in various government facilities. And we also have, oh, I don't know how many UFOs we've captured, according to people who have said things. So if you can't trust people you don't know who have said things, who can you trust? Science. Um, all right. I've got a rare recommendation for you of a content that you might enjoy. Now, the reason it's rare is because almost everything on television is trash. But I, I gave a chance to this one thing on Netflix. It's a new series called The Residents. I'm not sure if there's a the in front of it, but Residents or The Residents. Now, the first thing you need to know is it's super woke. And if you're surprised that I'm recommending something that's super woke, let me finish, and then maybe I'll change your mind. So it's super woke, but it's about a murder in the White House, and the president is a gay married guy. All the white men in the story are presented as dumb and possibly criminals. The hero of the series is a black woman who is the most brilliant detective in all the world. Everybody knows her, and uh, and she's extra good because she's overweight. And so that sounds pretty woke, doesn't it? Sounds like exactly something you don't want to watch, right? All right, I'm going to change your mind. So it happens in the White House, and they do these amazing visual fly-throughs of the actual. I guess it's not the actual White House, but they've built a model or a stage, a set, I guess, of the White House that is so impressive. So that if you've never visited the White House, you end up getting all these tours that they just sort of work in with the script. So it's usually somebody telling somebody else, "Oh, this room is where they have the barber shop, and this room is the pharmacy, and here's where they've got the pool table, and here's where the employees are." So you learn everything about the employee network in the White House, which is fascinating. The hierarchy and everything else, and then you see the physical living quarters of the White House, the part you don't normally see, and it's just so well done. And here's the kicker: the hard thing about watching any kind of long form content is that they will make you look at the scene that they spent money on, and they'll just make you look at it. So if they build a scene where somebody's trying to get through the desert before they die, they're going to make you watch that person get through that desert for 20 minutes, and you'd be like, okay, I get it. They're going through the desert. Can you speed that up? It's still desert. Got it. They're really thirsty. They're chapped. Their lips are chapped. I get it. So that's me watching most. But whoever did the editing, directing, writing on the show, The Residents, really did a good job because every scene is tight and fast. So it doesn't look like regular shows. It's got a whole feel to it that you haven't seen before. So that alone is worth watching. And lastly, I have to give it up that even though the casting is clearly woke as hell, um, everybody's really good. So you can't really pick out anybody and say, that person was only picked because they fit the demographic or something. They're all great. It's way too woke because it was probably made a year ago before DEI became more obviously illegal. But if you're thinking of trying something, just know it's super woke, and that will be part of the entertainment. But everything else about it, really well done so far. I recommend it. Well, apparently Grok is being upgraded. It's still in beta, but the feature that's being added is Grok will remember your prior conversations, but you can control it. So if you don't want it to remember it, you can turn that off. So that's not in every version of Grok yet. So the Grok that's built into X doesn't seem to have it yet, but the separate freestanding Grok seem to, at least in beta form. And you'll get more personalized responses and all that. So that could be a big deal. And if Grok can read my documents and talk to me and remember things, finally, maybe I can get something that can do the stuff that I want. Because it's been over a year and a half since I started playing with AI and thinking, oh, this can solve some real problems I have in my keeping my data straight and stuff like that. Nope, I can't even come close. But maybe they're close now. OpenAI um, is weirdly going to build, at least according to The Verge, build an X-like social network. So apparently, this is sort of rumored, so I don't know how true this is. But the rumor is that the X has such advantages because it can read its own data from X, and X has just tons and tons of human interactions. So it's really a valuable training tool. But the other AIs would not have access to that, so they're going to build their own. At least OpenAI is rumored to be building its own social network. Do you think that's going to work? I don't know. It's probably worth a try. Otherwise, they're going to have trouble competing. Well, if you wonder why California is so poorly run, here's another example. So the gas prices in California are already, I think, twice what you're used to in almost every other state, just about double. And part of that is because we have rules about refineries. So refineries are closing. And guess what? According to Just the News, Valero is announcing the probable closure, or pending closure, I guess, of one of its two remaining California refineries. And so California is going to lose 18% of its current refining capacity by the end of 2026, when we were already right at the limit. So why would a refinery want to leave California? Wouldn't you think that would be a great place to be? You got all those people driving cars and needing gas, and you're a refinery, and there's not a lot of refineries. Wouldn't that be the best business to be in? Well, not with the rules that California is putting on them. So one of the things that California did is it's got a statewide ban on the sale of new gas-powered cars in 2035. So if you were thinking of building a refinery, you would say to yourself, wait, they're going to stop selling gas cars in that state? Why would we build a refinery there? So that's a problem. And then there's some kind of rule that California passed that, what was the rule? New regulations that the state could determine when refineries are allowed to shut down for maintenance. So imagine you're running the refinery and the state gets to decide when you shut down for maintenance. And then there's new inventory storage requirements that would require refineries to build vast new storage tanks. So basically, these are things that sound good on paper, but the refineries look at it and say, oh, you just ruined the business model. I can't make money in your state. So California, you can't give fire insurance. You can't get gas pretty soon. What is it we're going to be able to get? We won't have electricity. So electricity, gas, fire insurance. Obviously, you can't drive anywhere because the streets are a mess. You can't really go downtown and shop because it might be too dangerous. We're just really killing it. Well, if you're following the story of Harvard versus the entire United States government, what's the latest here? According to Just the News, the Treasury Department is urging the IRS to pull Harvard's tax exempt status. Now, why? Well, according to Trump, that you can't have tax exempt status unless you're acting in the public interest. And apparently, they think Harvard's not acting in the public interest. The government wants Harvard to do more about anti-Semitism and more about DEI and basically just a bunch of things. And Harvard has decided that the government should not be telling a private institution what to do. And then the government said, well, very fine, but maybe the public should not be giving money to your institution since you're all private. So we'll be following this fight, Harvard versus the United States government. Well, here's something that is messed up. So remember when you thought that Doge was going to cut the budget and Trump was going to cut taxes for everybody? Well, apparently the Republicans are now considering raising the top rate to 40% for people who earn over $1 million. So that would be people with a small business that's doing well, for example. They would go from 37 to 40%. Now, in California, I think I've got like 13.3% state tax. So add that to the 40%, that puts you at 53% tax, for example. So Bloomberg News, I guess, was the first to report this. So there are a whole lot of people who support President Trump and support the Republicans who are going to say, wait a minute, one of the big reasons we supported you is we thought taxes for everybody would go down. Nope, not you rich people. You're going to pay more. So that sucks. So, but nobody cares about the rich, so it's sort of a free pass. Texas has just passed a universal school choice bill by a good margin. They passed it. So, and I guess the Senate already passed it. So it was the Texas House that passed it now. So looks like it's going to be a done deal. So Texas will be the 16th state. Corey DeAngelis is writing about this. 16th state to pass universal school choice. So that's kind of big. At least that's going in the right direction, school choice. You remember the story yesterday about Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York, who prosecuted Trump for allegedly claiming his properties were worth more than they were to get a loan. But of course, the banks that gave that loan were not depending on anything that Trump said about his properties. Their normal routine is to do their own evaluation of the value of any assets. So it turns out that Letitia James was credibly accused of being a mortgage fraud herself by claiming that her Virginia residence was her primary residence, claiming that her father was her husband, and claiming that a New York unit that she has had 4 units in it, which gave it better tax treatment, I guess, or not tax treatment, maybe it was mortgage treatment, than if she told the truth that it has 5. So what did she do after being credibly accused of the very crimes that she lawfared Trump into almost not being president? Her approach was to get really mad and give a speech and be extra mad, but also extra mad and extra loud, and just not mention any of her own problems. Just say, oh, we're not going to take it anymore. We're gonna get this guy. So I don't know what it's going to take her down, but she's got some interesting times ahead of her. Harry Enton is debunking one of the things on the internet. Apparently, Democrats, are trying to claim that even Republicans wish they hadn't voted for Trump. But apparently, the data doesn't show anything like that. And Harry Enton showed on CNN that 98% of Trump voters would vote the same way. But 98% of Kamala Harris voters would vote the same way too. So if the election were reheld today, it would be about exactly the same result. Nothing changed. So all this talking about who's doing what and how well they're doing, nobody's opinion changed. 98% of the people would still vote exactly the same, no matter what facts are in play. All right. Well, over in Europe, the ECB, which must be kind of like our Fed, I'm assuming in context, is lowering interest rates for the seventh time. And Trump notices that, and he says, well, why is that not happening here? So he thinks that Jerome Powell of the Fed is too late. He's always too late in lowering interest rates. And Trump says that Powell should do it now because it's happening in Europe and we don't have inflation at the moment. But Powell says he's worried about tariff-driven inflation. Now, does that sound like he's independent, or does that sound like he's kind of giving it to Trump? Because if he doesn't lower interest rates, it's going to be a big drag on the government. If he does, everything's going to look like it's heading in the right direction. So, and then Powell has also said that our federal debt is not at an unsustainable level. Do you believe that our federal debt is not at an unsustainable level? I think it is at an unsustainable level. So I am a little concerned that Powell is not operating on what's best for the country. I am a little worried about that. I see in the comments somebody asking me if I've abandoned Perplexity. No, Perplexity is still great if you want to talk to it. And it's an app on my phone, so it's quick. I routinely have more than one AI because I like to keep my finger in to figure out what's new and how one compares to the other. So I'm a bit of a geek. So anyway, Trump thinks interest rates should be lower, but doesn't look like it's going to happen. So just to make the Democrats have something else to complain about, according to Reuters, SpaceX is a leading contender for what Trump wants to build that he calls the Golden Dome, a defense for the country against missile attacks, meaning that it would shoot up our own counter missiles to knock down any incoming missiles. And SpaceX would be working with other companies, theoretically. Now, I don't think any final decisions are made, but this is just sort of who's in the lead for these things. But SpaceX would partner with Palantir and Anduril, and they'd have some kind of subscription model. So I think what SpaceX would do would be to provide the satellite intelligence, so that the satellites can see pretty much everything on the Earth, so it would know if a missile attack is coming. So that's good. And the subscription model would be the government wouldn't buy any of the stuff. They would just have a subscription, which kind of makes the military sound like it's not as serious. It's like, well, do you have a subscription? You haven't paid up your subscription, so we're not going to stop these missiles. Anyway, Reuters is reporting on that. Um, and all I have to say about that is let the Democrats begin bitching again that Elon Musk was looking through that government stuff so he could make money being part of the Golden Dome. Now, I know they're going to say, "Oh, why does Trump's good friend Elon Musk get, possibly it's not a done deal, but why does he possibly get this big contract?" And the answer will be because nobody else has Starlink. Like, who is the other entity that can even do that? So we'll see. You've heard Joe Biden and other Democrats try to convince their sheep that what Trump wants to do is reduce Social Security. They say the same thing about Medicaid, but there's no evidence of either of them. But here's what I never see in response. Trump has said that he wants to remove taxes on Social Security, meaning that if you collect Social Security and you're paying taxes, because you have other income, right now you would pay taxes on your Social Security checks, which I do. So that's my current situation. So if he were to remove taxes on Social Security, that would be the biggest increase in Social Security that maybe we've ever seen. I asked Grok, and Grok said 40% of people who get Social Security are also currently being taxed by the federal government, meaning they have other income that puts them in a taxable category. And therefore they're paying taxes on their Social Security. So I wonder why nobody ever brings that up. Is it because it's only good for people who are high income? But Trump is the only person I know who's made a major commitment. If he gets it done, there's no reason to believe he'll necessarily get the no taxes on Social Security. But that would be one of the biggest increases in the benefits of all time, right? And I never see anybody argue that. It's like not only does he not want to cut it, he wants to get rid of the taxes on it. That would be a pretty good argument. It is. It does lean toward the higher income people, but then you look at his other plan, which is to come up with a higher tax rate for the highest paid people, and it doesn't look like he's favoring the rich. It looks like he's just trying to reduce taxes. So at least those two topics would work well together. Well, a judge has ruled that the 530,000 illegal migrants that Biden flew in on airplanes would have to be tried individually before being deported. So even though they came in as a giant program, they could only be removed, according to this judge, if every one of them had a full vetting and a process, I guess. So they'd have to be tried individually. Trump, of course, and the Trump administration is mocking that judge because if you did try to do it individually, it literally is impossible. It just would take, 100 years or something. So that's not going to happen. So I assume this will just go to a higher court because the only thing you could do with this group, if you really wanted to get rid of them, the only thing you could do would be to do it as a group and just say the whole group is illegal because the program is, I don't know, I've decided the program was illegal for some good reason. So we'll see. All right, here's my favorite story. Now, as you know, this whole Kilmer Abrego Garcia guy, also known as the Maryland Dad, who got deported to El Salvador. Um, for the longest time, I did not find that story interesting. Not because it had no, interesting parts, but because I just don't like to get involved in stories about one person. Because unless it's telling you something about the larger world, it just doesn't seem like you should have it in your head at all. Yeah, unless you're like personally related to it or a victim of him or something, it just isn't important what happens to one person. Um, but there's so many moving parts to this now. It's become one of my favorite things. So here's what happened. Um, I can't tell if this is intentional, but the Trump administration had claims that he was a bad guy, so that the deporting was completely appropriate, and he had plenty of due process, and court had found him to be deportable, and he was a bad guy. But Democrats argued that there wasn't really evidence that he was a bad guy. So they decided to, one of the senators, Von Holland, he travels all the way down to El Salvador. And then on camera, several times, he referred to El Salvador as San Salvador. And apparently he got, no political interest whatsoever from El Salvador. I don't even know if anybody met with him. But he didn't get even to talk to the fellow who was locked up. So, and then Cory Booker was trying to lead an expedition of like-minded people to go down there and try to rescue him. So the Democrats are going all in, and then James Carville recommends the Democrats go all in on this and just take it balls to the wall, and they really make it a hill to die on. And the argument is that um, if we can let this happen to this one person, in other words, get deported and jailed without what they would call due process, but the people on the right say he did have due process, then it could happen to you. It can be extended. So here's what happened. So in the time between Democrats accurately saying that there wasn't clarity about him being guilty, they sort of doubled down and made it their biggest thing. And then yesterday it was revealed what he's actually been accused of. And he seems like the guiltiest guy ever. So, it's not like I can know for sure, but apparently he got picked up. He was arrested in the company of known MS-13 gang members. The law enforcement was told that he was ranked as a higher up person, which has a name, and he had a nickname that is only sort of gang related. He had a tattoo that seemed to be MS-13 related, although somebody's arguing that. He was wearing some Chicago Bulls gear, which, of course, regular people wear that too, especially there. Yeah, but apparently is somehow associated with MS-13 because they like the horns or something. So he's got tattoos. He's got the clothing of it. He's with the MS-13 people. He was caught with marijuana and suspicious amount of cash. And then credible sources said, "Oh, he's definitely MS-13," and they gave details and everything. But on top of that, in 2021, his wife filed a restraining order against him because he beat her up. He punched her with a closed fist and scratched her and tore off her shirt. And I think it was more than once. So she was afraid for her life about this Maryland dad. And then we heard, according to the Tennessee Star, in 2022, he was stopped driving without a license, and Tennessee Highway Patrol suspected him of trafficking the 7 people inside. So what they did was, after they stopped him, they learned he was on a terrorist watch list. He was on a terrorist watch list. So they called Biden's FBI, but Biden's FBI told them to release him. So he's on a terrorist watch list? Okay, release him. Wait, what? Yeah, so you said he's on a terrorist watch list, right? Yeah. Yeah, release him. Why? I don't know. I don't know. Now, how much of this do I know is true? Well, I don't know it's true, but it's a pretty long list of really bad sounding things that makes me think maybe the Democrats acted a little too hastily in deciding that they would put all of their weight behind this. Now, their argument, of course, as I said, is that if somebody like this, who maybe is a bad person, but if they can be jailed or deported without due process, then eventually that could happen to your mom. So, if your mom, for example, was a wife beater who wore MS-13 clothes and hung out with MS-13 and had an MS-13 nickname and position in the organization, and he was on a terrorist watch list, and he had been ordered by the court to be deported. Well, if that happened to your mom, how sad would you be when your mom got deported to the El Salvador jail, right? So the hilarious thing is that from a technical perspective, the Democrats might be right. There might be a little bit of due process that you wish there had been. But I'm not terribly worried about this specific guy. And then the argument is, but what about your mom? Later, your mom will be, picked up in the same process. And I'm thinking to myself, there's a long distance between this guy with his record and your mom. I mean, that's a pretty long distance. And one of the things about Democrats, which is probably true of Republicans as well, is once they get committed to a position, they just can't change. So if Democrats were reasonable thinking people, what they would have done is said, whoa, 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 we didn't realize he was this bad. You're showing us pretty good evidence of how bad he is. We'd like to still, press the point that maybe he should have had more due process. I'm not sure what he was supposed to have that he didn't get, because he got some due process. Otherwise, he wouldn't have a deportation order against him. But to me, it's just hilarious that they can't back off the political part of it. They could keep to their point that maybe in some way he should have had more due process, but they really need to back off supporting him coming back to the country. And even if he came back and got his due process, he would just be shipped back to that El Salvadorian jail. It is his country of origin. So I love James Carville apparently has given up on what he used to say, which is the Democrats just have to play to win. He's doubling down on this MS-13 guy, and he was telling Democrats that they should play to win, not to just win points. How in the world does Carville think that supporting the MS-13 guy is going to put the Democrats over the line to win elections? It's maybe the dumbest the dumbest thing the Democrats have ever done. So anyway, so they've got a lot of analogy thinking problem, which is if something reminds you of something else, you think it'll go the same way. So if it reminds you of that old saying, as Carville said also, first they came for this group and I said nothing, and then they came for this group and I said nothing, and then they came for me. Well, not everything goes that way, does it? For example, if you're a murderer, even if you're a citizen, are you going to go a different path than your mom who didn't murder anybody? I mean, we haven't taken it from, well, we've locked up a lot of people in prisons in the United States. They went through due process, but they got locked up, to, well, if you can use due process to lock up the criminals, what is to stop them from using due process to lock up your mom? That's analogy thinking. It sort of is ignoring how anything works in the real world. So anyway, Democrats have gone from bad to ridiculously bad. And then Carville has picked a fight with David Hogg, who's in the DNC. So Hogg wants Democrats to primary other Democrats because he thinks that some of those Democrats are not, qualified, or they're too old, or they don't have any fight in them. So he wants to go after other Democrats. And Carville says he should quit his position in the DNC if he wants to go primary people, because that seems like the opposite of what he should be doing. I have to admit, Carville's kind of right about that. If you're trying to win, probably your best play is not to primary anybody on your own side. First, you want to win, and then maybe later you could primary people. But so Carville is quite insistent that the far left part of the party needs to be abandoned, which would allow them not to win any elections whatsoever. And now he's going after David Hogg. Every part of this is sort of delicious because there's not a single part of it that doesn't look like a mistake on some level. And then, okay, I shouldn't say this at all, but I'm going to do it. So Senator Von Holland already went down there, and he went down there before it was revealed. He went down to El Salvador, but he did it before it was revealed that the guy was a wife beater. And so I was trying to imagine what would Von Holland say when he was challenged with that. It's been demonstrated, and there's legal documents that he beat his wife. And I wonder if he was thinking to himself, well, I'd have to know what she said right before he punched her. Now, that's the worst thought you'll ever hear today, but what are they going to say? Are they going to say, well, normally we're against the wife beater, but he didn't get enough due process? Anything they say on this topic is going to sound ridiculously wrong. So you might as well go for full wrong. Say, I'd have to know what she said right before he punched her. That's the wrongest thing you could say. Well, on X today, there was a user whose name is Matt Van Swal. And this is kind of important, his background. He was a former nuclear scientist at the U.S. Department of Energy. And here's what he wrote. He said on X, I consider myself fairly liberal up until a couple months ago. I watch CNN nearly every day to get my news. And after reading the truth about Abrego Garcia on X, I'm horrified at the media bias. And then he says, now I'm wondering, what else did I believe that was just a full-blown lie? And people tagged me on that so that I could inform him what else he believed that was a full-blown lie. So I just responded to him with a link to AmericanDebunk.com. So if you haven't seen AmericanDebunk.com, it's a full write-ups of the biggest Democrat hoaxes, everything from the fine people to the drinking bleach to all the classics. But I would be so curious about Matt Van Swal's journey. Like, is he going to read those debunks, and now is he ready? Because if you're not ready, you just start reading them and you go, blah, it's a bunch of propaganda from Republicans. I'm not even going to finish this. But if you're ready, like you've already made the first step yourself and you found out, hey, I'm starting to think this news isn't completely real. Now, you know what Gell-Mann amnesia is, right? This is sort of where this all came from. There was a physicist who noticed that when he read stories about physics, the one thing he knew about for sure, those stories were all inaccurate. But then he would convince himself that all the other stories were fine, until one day he thought, wait a minute, what are the odds that every time I know something about this story, it's wrong, but every time I don't know anything about this story, it's true? And then he sort of reasoned that maybe the news wasn't true in general. Well, that's why I mentioned that Matt Van Swal was a former nuclear and is a former nuclear scientist for the U.S. Department of Energy. I feel like if you're a scientist and you see that you've been fooled on an important story in the media and you see it for yourself, that it activates the Gell-Mann amnesia part of your brain where you go, wait a minute, just wait a minute. How many other things have I been, propagandized by? So we'll see. Um, so let's talk about the the Carmelo Anthony story. So that's the black teenager who killed a white teenager with a knife. I don't know the details of who started it or who was the bully in that situation. I think it's going to be complicated. But again, I had been ignoring this story because it was one off. It was tragic, but it didn't seem to me like it was saying anything about the world in general. Just there was one kind of unique and tragic story that happened between two teenagers that you wish hadn't happened. But apparently, my name has been pulled into the story. I really just tried to mind my own business on this and just completely stay out of it. But let me read to you what Matt Walsh said in a post on X, and then you can see why I got dragged into it without my without my willingness. So Matt Walsh posts this. He goes, "The people supporting Carmelo Anthony don't really believe the bullshit that it was, quote, self-defense. They don't care about that. When the video comes out proving that this was cold-blooded homicide, it won't matter. They're happy that he killed a white kid. It's that simple." Now, I wouldn't go that far to say that they're happy because he killed a white kid. Because Black America is a big, diverse group, and it might be true that some percentage have that perspective. But people remember that I got canceled. I got canceled for reading a survey that was data driven. I didn't make it up. That suggested that Black Americans had a problem with the white Americans, and didn't think it was even okay to be white. And it was something like 30 or 40% of the respondents. So, which is not a majority, but it's an alarming number. And I said, I don't think you'd want to spend much time around a group of people if 30% of them didn't think it was okay even to be you. And I would say the same thing if you reverse the races. If you, I like to use this example. If you were a Black professional and you were moving for work, and you had a choice of towns to settle in that were both close enough to work, and one of them was known to have a robust Ku Klux Klan entity in it, and the other one did not, which one are you likely to settle in? You would settle in the one that didn't have one because you would be safer. So people all make the same kind of decisions. But all I can say is I hope nobody does a poll on this Carmelo Anthony thing because I'm going to get dragged into this so hard. I saw my face was in a bunch of memes. So people dragged me into it, which I just think is funny. It doesn't bother me. Anyway, apparently there's some video they have. They think they have video that we haven't seen yet. But one of the questions I would have of this is, was the white kid a bully? Does anybody know that? Was the white kid a bully? Because obviously that doesn't justify murder, but I have sort of a trigger. I get triggered by bullies, and I would think about the situation differently if I knew that the white guy was a bully. So I don't know that. If it just turns out it was two teenagers doing teenage things and one of them pulled a knife and killed the other, then that's a completely different story. Yeah. So anyway, apparently I've become Somebody in the comments says the face of common sense about race. Um, that would be the nice way to put it. So I'll take that. RFK Jr. is getting closer to telling us what's causing autism. Do you remember the numbers that when RFK Jr. was a kid, one in, I don't know, 10,000 or something were autistic, but now it's one in like 31, which would be roughly one in every classroom. Does that sound right? In your experience, is there one autistic kid in basically every classroom? That does sound true to me. It seems to me it would be hard to imagine an entire classroom of 31 kids without at least one person that was identified as on the autism spectrum. So I do believe the numbers. I mean, that it tracks with observation and experience. But RFK Jr. is sure it's an environmental toxin. He's not committing to it being vaccinations or food or pollution, but it's one of those things, or something in the air or the food or something. But he also had a point that was kind of good, because some people said that it might be genetic, and I think his argument. Oh no, somebody said that it might be an artifact of better diagnostic criteria, meaning that maybe we always had the same amount of autism, but we didn't diagnose it the same. So now all that's different is we diagnose it. And RFK Jr. says, if that's true, that it's only about diagnosing it, why is it not happening in older people? How is it that older people are not being diagnosed with autism, but young people are? And that's a pretty good point. Because if it were only about the diagnostic tools, then people who were 55 would go into the doctor's office and the doctor would say, we got these new tools, and I can tell you that you've been autistic all your life, and we just couldn't detect it until now, or something like that. But that is not the case. It is highly concentrated in the young. So I guess we won't have the studies to know for sure, or at least to know what the studies say for sure, until September. But there are already some critics who are worried that RFK Jr. has made up his mind, and he's just going to say it's about vaccinations, even if the data doesn't point to it. I feel like that's a messed up opinion. It's not like I know RFK Jr. personally, but there's nothing about him that suggests that if he found out it was in the food, he would pretend it was in the vaccinations. I don't think there's any chance of that. And I feel like it's a complete misunderstanding of who he is and what he cares about and why he's doing this. He's trying to solve a real problem. He's not trying to win points. And he's sacrificing pretty much everything to see if he can fix this damn problem, which, is part of the larger problem of chronic illness. I think that the one and only thing that Kennedy cares about is getting the right answer. I don't think that there's even a little part of him that would say, oh no, my career or my reputation depend on it being vaccinations, so I'm going to pretend it was the vaccinations and throw away the studies that say it's anything else. That just doesn't seem like the guy we've been watching, does it? How many of you think that would even be like a wild possibility? I think he's one of the people who would say, I was 100% wrong. It was in the food and not the vaccinations. So let's go forward. I don't think there's any risk of that. It's a character thing. I think character-wise, he wants to get this right because so much depends on it. I mean, I can't imagine in my wildest imagination. I can't imagine him trying to rig the results. It just doesn't seem like him at all. So I'm not worried about that, and I'm very curious about what the outcome will be. Um, According to CNN, China's President Xi has made a statement now about the tariffs, and he said this: for over 70 years, China's development has relied on self-reliance and hard work, never on handouts from others, and is not afraid of any unjust suppression. Regardless of how the external environment changes, China will remain confident, stay focused, and concentrate on managing its own affairs well. He called the trade war unwinnable, but made it clear that China is not going to fold no matter how hot it gets. Well, nobody said that we were funding China per se. We did say that the trade deals are unfair, which he does not deny. So yeah, I think he's weaseling around the accusations. Let's talk about Gaza. Apparently, the Palestinians in general, not just we're not talking about Hamas, but the Palestinians who were in the West Bank, I guess, and had their own military and had their own political staff. I didn't know this, but the Amuse account is pointing out that the 70% of their funding for their little military and political stuff came from USAID, and that got cut. So now it's a total financial collapse, and they can't pay salaries. Now, how many of you knew that we were paying Palestinian military and Palestinian leaders salaries? If you had known that, would you have been in favor of doing that? See, it's good that we didn't know as much as we know now about USAID, because we wouldn't have been in favor of much of it. Now, I get the USAID is how we control things. So if we're paying the salaries of the Palestinian leaders, well, they might be a little more likely to do things that our CIA wants them to do. I get it. On the other hand, it's really tough to ask us to pay the salaries of a military in another country. It's just a hard sell. So you can see why they never were honest about it or forthright. But we'll see where that goes. Now, this is related to a second story. And let's see, this is according to the New York Times. So the New York Times says that when Netanyahu was here recently, he was trying to convince the Trump administration to attack Iran in May. And the Trump administration was divided on that. But apparently the decision, which presumably is a Trump decision, Trump told Netanyahu during the White House visit that no American support for military action would happen while negotiations with Tehran continue. Now, does that sound to you like good cop, bad cop? And do you think that's intentional? So the leak in the New York Times is that Netanyahu is planning to definitely attack in May. And he was just trying to get the United States to go, to get on board. Now, I don't think they would do it without American support, but it's not impossible. And then you hear also from the New York Times that Trump said no to the attack as long as Iran is negotiating. Isn't that sort of the perfect good cop, bad cop setup? It's kind of perfect, isn't it? Because if you're Iran, you're saying to yourself, all right, worst case scenario is they attack militarily. And then you find out they were one yes away from being attacked. All that had to happen was Trump to say yes. And he was talking to an ally who is very close to the United States. They have a good working relationship. And you know that Netanyahu was persuasive, right? Like he went in there with full tools. He's a very persuasive guy in general. And you know that he made a good case for doing it in May. You know he was strong on that. Trump still said no. So if you were Iran, you would say, "Oh my God, Netanyahu's the bad cop. So whatever we do, we've got to make sure his influence is mitigated." And Trump seems to be willing to reach a deal that doesn't involve violence, so we better work with him. It's just perfect good cop, bad cop. Now, but the part I don't know is, was that intentional? In other words, is the New York Times sort of maybe carrying a little water for both Israel and the United States by setting this up as a good cop, bad cop situation, which would be perfect for making a deal? If you wanted to really make a deal and not have military action, this is the perfect framing, and it's coming from the New York Times. So I always am a little bit suspicious when I see a story like this, but I wouldn't consider this anything bad, because it might be both true and very useful. The timing might be perfect. Well, according to the Daily Star, one of the captured Chinese soldiers who was fighting for Russia, you've probably heard this, Russia had some Chinese soldiers, and you might say to yourself, how do they recruit Chinese soldiers? Doesn't it seem like that would be hard to do? Well, this Chinese soldier said that he was, quote, tricked by TikTok videos. So he was convinced to leave his native country and to go to, he didn't know he was going to be in the front line. He thought he'd be in some kind of support role. But he was tricked by TikTok into thinking it would be glamorous to be like part of the Russian military because they look pretty cool. And, he'd really get to see the world and wouldn't be that dangerous. Next thing you know, he has no training whatsoever. They just hand him a gun and they put him in a trench. Nearly gets killed, but he gets captured instead. But according to him, TikTok brainwashed him. How many of you remember me saying, probably how many years ago, TikTok could brainwash you into doing anything? And people would say, that's a little bit hyperbolic. TikTok can't brainwash you into doing something dangerous. Yes, it can. It brainwashed this Chinese soldier into going to fight for another country with no training whatsoever in the most dangerous place you could possibly be, because TikTok made it look like a good idea. Yes, TikTok can brainwash you into doing things that are super dangerous for you. Now, it's not going to brainwash every person the same way, but if you're looking at groups of people, absolutely. It could convince you to do any dangerous thing. And we thought, well, that doesn't sound like a risk. Yeah, it's a pretty big risk. Well, Australia alleges they came up with a jam-proof quantum technology that's 50 times more accurate than GPS and can't be jammed. So the reason it can't be jammed is that it's not using the GPS satellites. And it's using some technology that can read the magnetic signals from the Earth. So apparently everything's got a magnetic signal, and they can tell with great certainty where they are based on the magnetic signal. Your comments are wild today. All right. Now, this might seem like a small story because it's just some improvement on GPS, but in a world where all of the weapons are going to be GPS related, it might be a big deal. I mean, it might be the difference between being attacked and not being attacked. If our drones, assuming that Australia let us use that technology, if our drones could not be blocked or jammed, but other people's drones could be, I don't think they'd mess with you, because we'd be jamming and they'd be not jamming. We'd be jamming. I feel like I'm writing a song. We be jamming, Jamming. Okay, no, that's not a song. So that's a big wild card coming for the military situation. I guess somebody found a big Chinese facility that nobody'd seen, and somebody spotted another one that has submarines. And it's weird that we're just spotting gigantic military facilities in China. Like we didn't know them. We didn't know before. They're gigantic. That's weird. So couldn't they still be shot down? Yeah, they could still be shot down, but they couldn't be stopped from finding their target. So that's what you really want to do. Shooting them down is the last choice. The first choice is to jam them so that they can't find their target. But yes, you could always shoot them down. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is all I wanted to say today. Hope you had fun. And I'm going to talk privately to the local subscribers now because they're so special in a good way. So thanks for joining on YouTube and Rumble and X. I will see you tomorrow, same time, same place. And locals coming at you privately in 30 seconds.